All right. Hello, everybody. I am Simone Fortier. I am the creator and founder of the Fascia Training Institute, and it's an honor to be here at Glymphatic. It is my second year, and just really love supporting Robin and her vision of making this bigger and getting the word of lymphatics out to the world. So first, I want to thank her for putting this on. It brings a community together where people are getting more interested in, one, self-care, how they can help themselves. Also, two, she brings in amazing practitioners and people bringing in a lot of knowledge to you, to serve you, to help you help yourself and other people. So just a shout out to Robin and Glymphatic. I flew in from Arizona to be here. I will always continue to fly in from wherever I live to be here to support Robin because she's super awesome. So Glymphatic Conference, third annual conference, which is super awesome. I'm going to talk about lymphatics and fascia and the brain and how that's related. It does work with, so I'm just clarifying this too. So there's a lot of top practitioners who do lymphedema, people who focus on lymph drainage, and people who focus on just general wellness. I'm bringing that together in this talk, talking about the glymphatic system. So my dynamic brain healing program moves the lymph in the brain. But my specialty is working with fascia that creates space inside the body. It also reduces impact forces and compression forces on the cranium. So how does that work together? And I just want to share too with that, what is fascia? People ask me that all the time. I'm sure everyone here, anyone a practitioner here? Yes, we'll see everyone, yay. So understanding what fascia is. So fascia has the power of creation because it is creation. Interesting concept. When the egg and sperm come together, fascia is formed. So that means it's interactive with every component of the body. It parallels the psyche. In my opinion, it holds and houses the soul of an individual. So with that, when that is compromised in any way, from looking down, standing too long, sitting too long, it creates forces on the body. Those forces impact the lymphatic system. So that's why the two are married. Also, too, the cerebral spinal fluid is married to the fascia. So I don't share this. I am a lymphatic expert. I've trained with Bruno. I've actually been treated by Bruno because he used to live in Arizona. He does not now. And also I did Dr. Voder's work. But my affinity is really with fascia, creating that space so every system can flow. So just taking that premise as a practitioner, I will always talk about fascia because I love fascia, but it is really supporting each other. I refer out to people who are lymphatic experts. So again, I know my lane, I'm creating space, and then after that, we need a lymphatic therapist to actually move the fluid in the body, or somebody who does cerebral spinal fluid movement as well. So just so you know that, and I created my program and the fascia work for those that had ongoing pain patterns, persistent symptoms of concussion, usually for over 5 years and decades. So that's the premise of the Dynamic Brain Healing Program, which is the glymphatic system. It creates the space there, but it directly impacts that. So it's a very powerful program. And now the words that I'm using, because the Dynamic Brain Healing Program is really 46 hours of training. So this is a transformational program. It's 46 hours of training, 16 online, 6 hours of case study. So again, if you're doing continuing ed credits and you need a few, there's a few. Just say it, put it in there. So just gonna go on here. And I put this out here because I'm on social media. I had a few people say, I've been following you for years. And I'm like, well, take action. Visit me over at the booth, come say hi, because I really want that engagement with people. I really want to support people on their path and their journey to gaining the knowledge to even helping themselves heal. So I really want that engagement. So if you want to follow me, it's awesome. I will be doing a contest for those that follow me or maybe like my stuff. And the contest would be, so I have one $200 off a course. And then again, if somebody does the most likes and all that sort of thing, I will also give them that as a gift. I want to also share before we get started here is that I am based in the US now. Everything is in US dollars, but every time I come to Canada or teach here, it is at par. So I'm doing that because I love Canada and I think 40% is a lot. And again, the $200 is off that par price. So just so that you're aware of that, I am here to support you. And I really want this to get into as many practitioners' hands as possible. Okay, so how many people here as your practitioners are really aware of the glymphatic system and how it works? Awesome. We have a few people in the room. So from now, this moment on, I'm really going to go into the kind of the anatomy, physiology, but looking at it, how it impacts. And I'm going to be talking about persistent symptoms of concussion, but this is also for lymphedema, because starting in the brain, all pain really begins in the brain, in my experience. So because of the fascia and the makeup of the brain, the extracellular matrix, and the beginning of creation, it's all one system. So in one system means that you can impact the rest of the body from working on one region fascially, but I think a huge impact is on the brain, releasing that compression forces, because that also affects hormones, that also affects lymphatic fluid, cerebral spinal fluid, and by releasing those forces, creating that space, again, affects every system, including the pituitary, which is hugely important to hormones for women and men. And so again, I'm going to follow this. I'm going to try and be on track here. So I do the anatomy and physiology piece. So the glymphatic system is a network of perivascular pathways that allows cerebral spinal fluid to flow through brain tissue, clear out waste product, and it's named after the glial cells which support and regulate the process. The key components of the glymphatic system include, and I'm just going to say for the glial cells, are hugely important in trauma and concussion, and they're shearing there. So doing lymphatic therapy, doing the fascial work helps to restore and create new glial cells. And that's also part of the nervous system. So the cerebral spinal fluid and interstitial fluid, the CFS is produced in the carotid plexus in the ventricles of the brain. And by releasing that pressure fascially, the cerebral spinal fluid can flow. And also, too, releasing fascially restrictions at C1, C2 can help move the lymphatic fluid into the brain at night while we sleep. So if there's that restriction there, and if you're a practitioner and you're doing these treatments and the person's symptoms are getting worse, there is a fascial restriction. And that is probably in about 20% of the people that you see. 80% that may not happen. So the CFS, it circulates around the brain and spinal cord, providing nutrients, removing waste, and cushioning neural tissue. The glymphatic system facilitates the exchange of CFS, interstitial fluid, and allowing toxins to be flushed out. So this is hugely important when we're talking about lymphedema and other origins of disease. So if the lymphatic system doesn't move and it's restricted fascially, you're doing the treatment and it lasts maybe an hour or two. And then if there's that fascial restriction, it comes back. So that's how the two are married to each other. And fascial restriction comes from a laying down of fascial fibers. So fascial fibers lay down and form to what you do the most. So that is how, it's like, I've got the restriction, this tightness, and stretching might not relieve those fascial fibers because some of them are there for decades, which means they've gone from mobile to like clay and then like cement. So the cement part is really the part that impedes lymphatic flow in the brain, but all over the body. So the detoxing part is hugely important. We're going to talk about that a little later in the talk. So the aquaporin 4 is part of the water channels. And again, that's in Bruno's book. He talks about that as well. Are specialized proteins found on the end feet of the astrocytes, a type of glial cell. So astrocytes are sheared in trauma and concussion. So with that, that creates also too an inflammatory response. So that's where too moving the lymph, creating that space fascially, helps with the recovery of concussion. So how that is interesting and how it's married to, so lymphedema comes from, you know, there's a lot of reasons, but I'm going to talk about injury to a lymph cell. Right? So that can come from any type of trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma. And from that, it's like, how do we get that lymph moving? How do we get that lymph happy again, that lymphocyte? And by doing these movements and creating that space in the fascia, actually release the tension on that lymphocyte. So these channels regulate fluid flow between CFS, ISF, ensuring efficient removal of waste. Waste creates disease. So if the lymph can't move fast enough and move it out of the body, and the number one really cause of a lot of issues right now is dehydration. So people don't drink enough water, and if they do, I have a lot of people like that, I'm drinking like 6 liters a day. And I'm like, okay, that's a kidney issue. But what's happening is they're lacking the minerals to keep that fluid in their body. So now as part of the educational process is you want people to sip water. Everyone guzzles it like the rainstorm in the desert, and it washes all the minerals off. So then again, they're dehydrated. So this is something that's really important, is very specifically hydrating the fascia, also too making sure that they're sipping water. And generally people say, oh, drink lots of water after treatment. They don't know what that means. So to them, it could be 1 cup of water. So you have to really be specific in the languaging with people, especially when they're having a change internally with the lymphatic work or fascial work, because their brain can't process that information. So that's my area of expertise, is being very specific, also writing it down, having them a little requisition or prescription for what they need to do after. So how to keep really the water in the body is electrolytes. So the reason for that is because the minerals in the soils are depleted. That is a fact. They're over farming. They're not letting the soil sit for years. They can't do that. So then it's lacking those minerals. So now we actually have to put it in or eat a tremendous amount of foods that contain minerals, which is fruits, vegetables, anything that's grown. So it doesn't come out of a bag. So these disruptions in the aquaporin function has been linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So again, these are all related. Any disease in the body does affect the fascia and the lymphatic. Okay, so the third hidden detox system is the perivascular spaces. These spaces surround the arteries and the vein within the brain and serve as the main highway for cerebral spinal fluid movement. As CFS flows through these channels, it helps wash away any toxins that accumulate in the brain tissue. So hugely important, and oftentimes practitioners can work regionally when we're working with the fascias, like, okay, why is the lymph isn't moving? Is there a restriction there? So looking at an assessment to see, is there restrictions fascially? I created that assessment to help people determine that. Because if we're moving it here, or even in the diaphragm, but it has nowhere to go, fascially there's restriction because everyone is leaning forward, looking down, huge fascial restrictions there, which impact the lymph directly. So the astrocytes and glial cells, astrocytes are glial cells that form a key part of the glymphatic system, guiding fluid flow and regulating waste clearance. Microglia, another really important one in concussion head injury trauma, is another type of glial cell, plays a role in identifying and degrading harmful substances. So if there's a dysregulation in that person, trauma can come from surgery, radiation, chemo. It can come from physical or emotional, constant emotional stress and chronic pain. All of those change the biochemistry in the brain, which changes the function of these, which then impacts how the lymphatic flows. Okay, so really important. And how it functions as the body's waste removal network. The glymphatic system operates through a series of steps that involve fluid exchange, toxin clearance, and waste removal. Waste clearance, CFS, enters the brain along the arteries, percolates through the brain tissue, and that we want that constantly moving. Posture impacts that. So also too, when you're doing a lymphatic system, their posture matters. So that piece of education could really improve their lives, but also to your treatment. So if I do a lymph system and then I go and I sit in my chair and I'm looking at my phone, that's going to restrict it. So the education doesn't stop in your office. It has to continue on so that those people understand how important it is to not look down. It's changing really the whole nervous system of children. That is devastating because I see kids, you know, they come in, they're 6 or 8, and I'm like, oh, you have the posture of, you know, like a 15-year-old. Oh my gosh, that's ancient. No. And then I have somebody come in, they're 20. I go, oh, you have the posture of a 40-year-old. Like, no, that's ancient. And then I have someone come in who's 40, and I go, you have the posture of a 65-year-old. I'm like, no, that's ancient. And then I have someone who comes in who's 65, and I go, you have the posture of a 60-year-old. Now, isn't that interesting? Because they didn't look down their entire life. So hugely impacts people's ability to heal, that one simple thing. So looking at that, going back to my slides, and I will always do these side things because I like the experience of it, and the storytelling really helps impact really the learning here. So as the CFS moves, it collects metabolic waste, such as amyloid beta and tau proteins, hugely important for plaque in the brain. Plaque in the brain causes the Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, and so many other things. So lymphatic movement, fascial movement helps actually to reduce that. So the faster your lymph moves, the faster your CFS moves within reason, not like a speed car. And the fascia space actually de-ages people. So hugely impactful. So these proteins are linked to neurodegenerative diseases. The waste is carried out through the brain, through the venous system pathways, and ultimately eliminated out of the body. So with that, again, we need the waterway clear. We also need the water coming in. And that is a problem because people are drinking Coca-Cola. They're drinking everything but water, and that's putting toxins in. So the lymphatic system is working harder to process that, as well as plastic food comes out of a bag. The lymph is trying to work with that, and then something happens and the lymph is working with that. So the lymph is actually overloaded. So again, with your work, moving that faster helps to get that out. But it's the understanding of the person, the person who has it, that something's got to change there nutritionally as well as movement-wise. So the glymphatic system operates through a series of steps that involve fluid exchange, toxin clearance, and waste removal. So nutrient delivery. So again, everything we eat, everything we drink changes the biochemistry in our body, our brain, our lymph, our fascia. And we've come so far from understanding that everything we put in our mouth affects that. So we might logically maybe sometimes know it, but like, oh, I even have practitioners that have forgotten that, medical doctors, and don't understand the power and the impact of that has on detoxification, methylation. Because if you can't methylate certain things, like even stuff in the air, chlorine in the water, then we have to look at how does that happen, and you do that through nutrition. So that also goes into genetics. Some people, my demographic I work with are neurodivergent. Neurodivergent people tend to not methylate. They're also deficient in B12. So that impacts how they can process toxins, which is really important too when you're working with people with cancers, lymphedema. Like there's an underlying reason for that. So how can we impact them as a practitioner, and how can they help that themselves? So adding these additional nutritional things in really impacts their recovery. Okay. So alongside the nutrient delivery, alongside waste removal, the glymphatic system helps transport glucose, lipids, and essential molecules to neurons. This supports brain function, energy, metabolism, and cellular repair. So now you're seeing like the glymphatic system is hugely important to thought, personality, injury recovery, and also to disease and cancer, and also aging, Parkinson's. And that is, again, it's my passion to do all this, is creating that space, working on that lymph, getting it moving, and knowing systemically, even if you are working locally with an individual, that there's more there. Okay, because if the lymph is moving here, but it's not in the brain, and again, at birth, there's compression force, which can cause concussion. So again, that can change people's biochemistry, or it might not. The suction as well can change the shape of the brain, which also impacts the lymphatic, the fascial system, and also the vertebral system. So everything matters from birth. And what's really cool is all of that can be resolved with doing the work that you do. So the glymphatic system operates through a series of steps that involve fluid exchange, toxic clearance, and waste removal. I keep saying that over and over because repetition also helps learning. And so if somebody asks you about that when you're working with the brain, is there lymph in the brain? I get that question all the time. Most people think there's only lymph nodes in the clavicle region and then in the groin. And they're like, really? It's everywhere? It is everywhere. And so it's super important to help people understand that because of what they've seen, like, I don't know, in the media or whatever. They think really there's only lymph nodes in 2 spots. So it's very important, of course, as you know, for the immune system, inflammatory control. The system carries immune cells and antibodies throughout the brain, helping fight infections and reduce neural inflammation. Impaired glymphatic function can lead to chronic inflammation and increase of risk of brain disease. But also, too, it can impact how somebody recovers from lymph damage from surgery. Because if the lymph isn't moving around the brain, it will impact the rest of the body. So the role of sleep in glymphatic function. Sleep is one of the biggest concerns of people currently. Everyone is having issues sleeping in somewhat, and also 2 people that are neurodivergent are very proud that they can work on 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night. And yes, it is not optimal because the body and the lymphatic system and the cerebrospinal fluid needs a little bit more time, and also to growth hormone. So growth hormone, acetylcholine, is released while we're sleeping. Those 2 are very impactful in how we age. The quality of our skin, the quality of the lymph. So sleep, really 7 to 9 hours is generally the best. And also too, with circadian rhythms, going to bed before 10:30 is really important to maintain circadian rhythms in the body, which also helps fluid flow in the body as we get to the natural rhythms of the planet. So the glymphatic system is most active during sleep, particularly slow wave sleep. This is why good sleep hygiene is essential for brain detoxification. Sleep hygiene, which impacts everybody, is putting away all those gadgets at least an hour before bed. And the one thing I will share now, because while we're here, brain cancers are on the rise, cancer's generally on the rise. That EMF that's emitted in your house, also too from the 5G tower, is coming in while you're sleeping. And what happens if your cell phone is beside your bed or anywhere in that room, the cell phone is actually searching for the mothership all night. So it connects to the cell tower and then it stops, and then it connects and it stops. That impacts sleep. That also impacts lymphatic fluidity. There we go. And that means then the brain isn't detoxifying while you're sleeping. So hugely impactful. What I recommend, I do it myself. I turn the entire router off every night. My sleep quality improves tremendously. If I'm not able to do that, if you're in a situation where you're in a hotel or in somebody else's house, make sure that it's far away from where you are, because it does impact your lymphatics. And then also too, your lymphatics will be detoxing it all night long, and it impacts the tightness of your fascia. So that frequency impacts the fascia. It impacts the lymph, the cerebrospinal fluid, and basically every cell. So we got to do as much as we can. And when you have kids, they want to have the Wi-Fi on all night. Well, it's a great learning opportunity for them to actually go to sleep and not game all night, which again isn't good for the lymph, isn't good for the brain. So brain cells shrink up to 60% during sleep, increasing fluid flow and enhancing waste clearance. So the brain cells are shrinking. And so also too, when that's happening, the lymph is supposed to be moving, and I'm saying supposed to be, but if people are super tight and they're sleeping and they're waking up and they're so stiff and those steps are so painful, it's because their entire system is congested. And you know that term, it's congested. So the movement helps, and they're like, oh, by 10 a.m. I'm feeling pretty good. I don't have that back pain. It's like their lymph is slowed down that much. And when you know when that happens, there's toxicity in the system. So we really also want people to move as much as possible before sleep, which is light stretching. That also helps the engagement, and breathing. So people also too have stopped breathing, but we're still alive. But every time people think, they're concentrating, they're looking at their phone, they're not breathing. So that makes the fascia tighter. Tightness stops lymphatic flow. So there's a lot of self-care things that people can do easily to start changing that. So poor sleep can impair lymphatic function, leading to the buildup of toxins associated with Alzheimer's, dementia, and cognitive decline. So a well-functioning lymphatic system is critical for mental clarity, memory retention, and long-term brain health. Supporting these systems through good sleep, hydration, and movement can help reduce the risk of neurodegenerative disease and optimize cognitive functioning. So my specialty as well is brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury, concussion, persistent symptoms of concussion. This is hugely important to their recovery. This is also hugely important to, again, disease in general, because stress on any system creates disease. And it's chronic, constant stress. And if you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business, if you're a mom, you know the stress never ends. But it's how your body processes that stress. So does it move through you, or is it stuck? And if it's stuck, that leads to the overwhelm, anxiety, the fatigue, the brain fog, is it worth it? These kids are driving me mad. And it's like, don't have the skills to do it internally. You don't have the nutritional ability internally, but maybe not the space or the capacity. And all these treatments give people that capacity. So you're seeing when people do lymphatic work, they feel amazing, they're relaxed. And that's really how people should be most of the time, living in that space where there's ease. Life isn't easy, but there should be ease in that. So the lymph creates ease inside the body. So the brain fog and fatigue, there's slower reaction times. So when you're seeing people with symptoms, this might be part of what's happening with them. So slower reaction times, increased anxiety, mood issues, higher risk of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, TBI-related issues. So right now, there's a big move on people who their parents have got Alzheimer's or dementia, and they want to really stop that from happening. And that is possible by doing these treatments. So again, quality of sleep, moving the lymph, and people generally moving is really hugely important. And I do get asked about the We call it hydrotherapy. You know, everyone hears like the hydrotherapy goes back really thousands of years. The ice baths are really popular, but they don't look at those people who have circulatory issues and they're cold already. So that's also ADHD people. That's people who have low B, anemic. They don't work for those people, right? And that's why every treatment should be specific to that person's need. Hot, cold is great. You know, and now the research is showing that you don't want to ice after you do an injury. That ice is interfering in the body's natural inflammatory response to heal. It stops it. So then there's more scar tissue laid down. That scar tissue again impedes the lymph. So again, looking at what works best for that person. And for me, I'm one of those people, I'm like, I'm not doing that cold plunge. I'll do it if I can do heat immediately after and leave with heat. So again, it's very specific, but the media, Facebook, Instagram are saying it's super awesome. It is for some people who are running at a higher temperature. Because the cooler you are, the slower you age. Just saying. So what harms the glymphatic system? Chronic stress, poor sleep, sedentary lifestyle, toxic exposure, head injuries, and concussion. So right now I want everyone to follow me and put your arms up over your head. Yes. So I tell people to do this movement. It's a pumping movement. What is it doing? It's moving the lymphatic. It's so easy to do. It's impossible to do. So people sit at their desk for hours and they don't move their lymph. This is actually, people stop doing this movement and then they simply cannot get their luggage out of an airplane, or they tear a rotator cuff because they haven't moved that. There's the fascial restriction. And what do we know about the lymph, right? So super easy thing to do as a practitioner in between people, put your hands over your head, because you do not do that in your practice, right? 8 hours, 10 hours a day, your arms are down. And then some people at night, they're sitting on the couch, their arms aren't over their head. Part of the movement of walking is also to move the lymph, cross the right and left hemispheres of the brain, to connect the brain, to get that stability and that connection. Who walks anymore, right? Unless I have to do the exercise, I have to go out there, but who wants to do it in minus 40, right? Nobody. So you can stand and do the movements, this and that, but this actually is so easy to get the lymph moving in the body. I say let everybody to do that. It's hugely important. Quality of sleep does matter. Deep sleep is essential for brain detox. It's essential again for releasing growth hormone. And as we get older, that GH gets less. In some people, trauma, stress is also less. So the ability of the body to repair and heal can get less and less. So working towards what do they need to get to sleep. And it's good proper hygiene. It's the gentle stretching and movement before bed. It's breathing, even taking 10 deep breaths. And I say even. One deep breath could change everybody in here. It actually relaxes your entire body and calms down the vagus nerve. Wow. That's all I need to do. And it immediately calms people down. But people don't do that again anymore because they're so busy looking at their phone, looking down, watching, or working at night, or watching a show. And I do watch these shows. I don't very much anymore because it impacts my sleep. Is the dramas, the Comic-Con movies, not the Lymphicon movies. So the Comic-Con, I used to binge on Marvel in the height of my concussion to really down-regulate my brain. So different for is the ADHD neurodivergent people actually have to stimulate their brain to relax. It's unusual. So it's a difference of 80%. So they are stimulating their brain to relax so they can be present for you. But it irritates everybody because they think they're distracted, but no, they're trying to stimulate so they can be centered. So I would binge on these because I couldn't sleep for years, and I'd do 4 hours before I could go to sleep. Not optimal for my subconscious mind images, all this violence and whatnot, but it's like now understanding that, how can we do the sleep hygiene so you start to go to bed, put the nutrition in, do the breathing and that. But again, ADHD people don't like meditation. So I created meditation for the ADHD person, and there's one there. And does it work? Say yes. Yes, because it's different than the 80% of the world. So our brains are different. So what we need is different in meditation to be present. So hugely important. But sleep is essential to healing. Sleep is essential, but also too, as we know when we're sleeping, because we have beds and people are very stiff or they have a partner, they don't move as much as in nature. When you see in animals in nature, they're always moving around. Well, they're still asleep, but they get up and they move. That's moving the lymphatics, that's healing, right? So we've stopped doing that as a culture. We have a bed, we lie there, and maybe we turn to side because we're in pain. So that's not also optimal reason to move, but seems like that's most of the North American population has some sort of discomfort, so they move at night. So we'd rather just have that gentle movement before bed, and so people have a sounder sleep. So nasal breathing, proper oxygenation, limit alcohol and processed foods. That's hugely important before bed. ADHD people, neurodivergent people self-medicate. So it's not the all or none thing. We look at how do we gradually do this to improve really their general health, lymphatics, and so they're not detoxing more than what they should normally do at night. Okay, we don't want to impact that. So sleep on the side. Studies suggest side sleeping improves glymphatic drainage. Again, that's personal with people. But all of these can be re-educated. So fascia is crucial in the body's detoxification system, particularly in the brain. Recent studies suggest that the fascial movement and hydration influence the lymphatic system's efficiency, a waste clearance pathway in the central nervous system. Since fascia connects and encases the vascular, lymphatic, cerebrospinal fluid, every cell, any restriction or dehydration in the fascial tissue impedes cerebrospinal fluid flow. What's really interesting here is that with fascia, having one sip of water changes the fascia instantly. So I do that in my practice. People come in, they're severely dehydrated. I have them one sip, and then the fascia actually relaxes. It's a very cool thing to notice, but it also impacts the lymphatic system instantly. So this reduced fluid mobility hampers the brain ability to flush out metabolic waste, including amyloid beta, which is associated with neurodegenerative diseases. Therefore, maintaining healthy fascial mobility is essential for optimal brain detoxification and long-term cognitive health. Fascial restrictions can significantly disrupt the circulation of the brain fluids, such as cerebrospinal fluid, interstitial fluid. Again, these are caused by chronic tension, poor posture, trauma, surgery, any scar tissue, any lines of tension in the body. But the biggest one right now that's impacting it is posture. That's one of the biggest ones in the population. The stagnation contributes to toxins, inflammatory mediators buildup, potentially leading to cognitive dysfunction, fatigue, and increased susceptibility to neurological conditions. So fascia, nervous system, lymph are really an enclosed family. They really are important to each other. The glymphatic system is responsible again for clearing brain waste during sleep, the rhythmic movement of CFS. So that's hugely important. Cranial fascia regulates intracranial pressure and mechanical tension, including the dura mater surrounding the myofascial tissues. If the fascial network becomes restricted and misaligned, it can reduce arterial pulsatility and hinder CFS and lymphatic circulation. This disruption comprises the lymphatic system's efficiency, decreasing the brain's ability to detoxify, and therapeutic intervention is necessary. So again, once the fascia gets thicker, and thicker, people can see there's like a vice on my head, or there's a vice here, or again, they're collapsed inward and they feel heavy. So hugely important to really finding that out. Because if they feel so light after lymphatic, but the next day they're like, oh, I'm heavy again. They're like, okay, the fascia is not allowing that treatment to last. So chronic stress, It's the number one cause of disease in people. So stress is healthy in limited dosages. But in today's world, that's not happening. There's so many stresses on each person. But how do you move that through? That's doing the self-care. That's doing the movement. That's also taking time for yourself, reading, breathing, the hydration, taking a weekend off, without your family, with friends, doing something just for you to recharge your system. And again, I can talk about that a lot, but it seems like certain people I'll put that off, I'll put that off, I'll put that off. But the body needs to be recharged, and that's what's happening at night. And we need to replenish those systems. There we go. So it impacts all of these. Optimizing lymphatic system optimizes what we talked about: breathing, movement, fascia, deep sleep, circadian rhythm, hugely important. Ooh, I did something. Okay. And the role of nutrition in brain detox, lymphatic detox, is essential for keeping the person healthy. So you want an anti-inflammatory diet. So I get asked a lot about the fasting. So the brain does not like fasting, period. The brain likes food. The brain, the liver, the highest consumers of calories. So your liver is kind of pretty dominant, and it will steal most of them first. So the brain may not get the nutrients it needs. When that happens, there's anxiety, overwhelm, suicidal ideation, there's personality changes. All of that's biochemical, but that's hugely important that it's the highest consumer. So I'm going to say specifically, fasting, the brain does not like fasting. What likes fasting is inflammation. So the less inflammatory foods you eat, and the more you contain it to a certain time, gives the lymph time to detox. So what's happening now is people eating all the time, and they're eating foods that come out of a plastic bag. So that is impacting the detoxification of the lymphatics. So yeah, if you shorten the time people eat, they will lose weight and they'll lose inflammation, but the brain is starving. So I'm very specific when I'm working with people, exactly what's their goal, what do they need, how to prevent disease. And it's not about what's all over the world right now. If you're this age and you can only eat between these hours, and this age and you can eat, your brain basically doesn't agree with that, but inflammation does. So keep that in mind. The other thing too I want to share is that the two opposing systems are your fascia and your brain. They are linked, they are parallel, but fascia loves movement, but the brain doesn't like change. So to get you guys to stand up right now takes a lot of energy. Even though you don't want to sit. Even though you don't want to sit, you'll stay seated because the brain doesn't like change. And I've asked you to actually move and change seats, that'd be even bigger. So fascia loves movement, the brain does not. So understand that. They're two opposing, although they are in parallel. Okay, so super cool. The role of nutrition, the glymphatic function, always having the right omegas. Here's the interesting thing: ADHD people, neurodivergent people are not born in omegas because we don't produce those, but they lack the ability to absorb. Okay, so that lack of ability to absorb omegas leads to actually hyperactivity. That's how important omegas are. Also too, to brain development, lymphatic flow, inflammation in the joints. This is huge. So people that are neurodivergent, they're born deficient in 7 nutrients. That is a fact. It's been studied for years. It's studies beyond what I've done. They're out there. My team can get those for you if you do want those. They're also deficient in magnesium, B's, iron, and zinc. So that also leads to cognitive issues. Each one of those directly impacts cognitive functioning and also to how we can repair and heal internally. So food does matter. It changes the biochemistry in our body, and each individual brain and person has a different biochemistry. That biochemistry determines your personality and how you're reading that PowerPoint. So an ADHD person who multitasks and all this stuff, they're actually reading 1 or 2 words off that page. And then they're filling up a whole story in between, depending on what their brain's doing. So very interesting. Concussion does that, it mimics that, also brain injury, and also too, people who have chronic stress. They're not able to actually read what's on there because they simply don't have the internal nutritional ability or capacity to see what's on the page. And so I have a test that's online, and people retake it every 2 months. It's a brain health assessment. And every time they take it, they're like, is that the same test? As their brain heals, the question is different. It's the same question. So imagine that in personal relationships and communication and how misunderstandings occur. And it's like, well, you said that. No, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. And so again, that's brain biochemistry. That goes into more the quantum part of healing, which is really part of what I'm teaching, is quantum healing on that level. So bringing and bridging everything together, and in the 4th dimension, which is kind of cool, which leads into my dynamic brain healing program. I created this. I've been teaching it really for 15 years, and it's creating space in the cranium, and it affects the lymph. So people who's a lymph expert, this is just another tool that creates that space. This transforms people's practices as well as their own physical pain, which is really amazing. I created it out of a need because I had six mild traumatic brain injuries as an adult, over 50 as a child, extreme sports, always falling, hitting my head, seeing stars at least 50 times. So it changed my biochemistry. And in my 4th head injury, I basically lost my hearing for 2 years. I have a lot of neurological damage. I couldn't speak. Sometimes too, I'm like when I'm reading, some words I just can't pronunciate because of that. But I'm here because I've created these programs to heal myself. There wasn't anything available. I synthesized some things, and then I actually downloaded or created some other techniques to really create this. So this is my passion project. It goes along with the brain nutrition program, and it's looking at detoxifying the brain, creating that space, improve sleep. And I was asked earlier with this treatment, how long does it take for it to work? I created these treatments. The brain nutrition program works instantly when people do it, and it lasts. Super cool. With this program, it changes pain immediately, and it lasts. So I've done these case studies, and all my practitioners do case studies as well. And the case studies show, 1, could I teach it? And I can, it says. Stats say I can. And every practitioner can replicate the results. So I created a system that you don't have to do it in one particular order, but the system works, and it helps the particular demographic that was me. Neurodivergent, trauma, brain injury, and now I can actually step here because I had extreme social anxiety, and that's gone. I had suicidal ideation my entire life. I don't have that anymore. I haven't had it for 8 years, and I didn't know it wasn't normal. So that is part of ADHD and trauma, because that's a biochemical deficiency. That's how important nutrition is. So hugely, hugely valuable. The cranial decompression is extremely important for circulatory, lymphatic, cerebral spinal fluid, fascia, nervous system. Huge for the nervous system. Because again, if we're looking down and forward, our nervous system is always in fight or flight, always. And the more we look down, the more we actually dump what's called GABA out of our brain, which increases anxiety. So looking at your phone just physically increases anxiety. It doesn't matter what you're watching. So I recommend here, so if you're sitting at your desk like this, or having a holder. And I travel a lot, and I've been in 3rd world countries, and I'm saying that in the sense that they really get physiology. Because I'm walking around, they're all like holding their phone here. And here is here. And I'm like, actually, I'm just going to share, I was working with a quarterback in the NFL, Mitch Trubisky, and he's like doing this during the demo. I'm like, dude, that's rude. And I go, just put it here. And he goes, but that's more rude. I go, no, this is better for you. And then this is not less rude than that. So just And I go, you can influence a lot of people, right? So start doing that. And it's like understanding that, hold it here, it's just as rude as being here. And another thing, just for the cell phone thing, is that if you have the cell phone on the table, even while eating dinner, that disengages the other person. So if you're out for dinner with people, take the phone off the table, because it is a distraction, and the other person will feel like if it's on there, they're less heard, and you're not present for them. Okay, just that's an aside. Restored focus, cognitive clarity. The program and the system is now done clinical trials, case studies, and it shows that it works. This is, I'll be presenting these findings actually at the Fascia Research Congress in August, also at the Military Tactical Conference in San Antonio, and it's being publicized as well in a journal this year, really showing the efficacy of this work. And it is amazing. And I had a lot of, this is an interesting thing too, as practitioners, you might experience this, that I've had a lot of NFL guys, NHL therapists, medical team, and like, until you have the research, we're not going to implement this program. And I said, but what if it helps your guys? No. Now that's a disservice. And I think everybody in this room is in service to support people. So there is that side, that's the academic side. I didn't want to do it. I was forced to do it, but I'm getting a PhD out of it, which is super awesome. But yeah, it's taken me 10 years, because collecting data, especially practitioners, well, entrepreneurs, 100% of them have ADHD, by the way. So if you have your own business, you have ADHD. Practitioners, there's different demographics, but a lot of practitioners also have that as well. So herding practitioners to get their case studies in or holding their hand takes years. So hopefully the new batch doesn't take so long, because now through the growing pains of getting all this done, we have quite a system, so it makes it easy for you guys to do the case studies. So super easy, just filling in forms, which is super awesome. So the key takeaways today, I love Bruno. He's an amazing person, and so is Robin. This quote from him, a healer is never done learning. The moment you believe you've mastered it all, you'll stop truly healing. And I continually take courses. I'm doing courses right now with the Carrick Institute, doing functional neurology, just because I love the brain stuff and I want to keep learning. And Dr. Carrick is doing research at Harvard now. So he's doing a lot of that on the brain injury and concussion and all that sort of stuff. So we can bring a cohesive language. And then I'm going to say the mainstream healthcare, which is you guys, the language of fascia, lymph, and cerebral spinal fluid, cranial sacral, is still also, people are arguing about what that is, especially in fascia. So we need a cohesive language so we can communicate. But, you know, like I'm going to say too, like Anatomy Trains is a great book, super awesome. Ooh. Is a super book, but fascia doesn't work that way. That's a two-dimensional book. So when you're dealing with the fascia, it gives you the language so we can communicate to each other, to other practitioners, what we're doing. Okay, so just to keep that in mind when you have this information, that it's just it's a format that you can communicate to other people, and now people can understand that. So hugely important. Again, always prioritize sleep and recovery. Movement is hugely important for detoxing, and explore the Dynamic Brain Healing course. It's a 46-hour course. Also includes one private consultation with me. It includes a brain health test, and I go through that with people because, again, a lot of practitioners are neurodivergent and they're really in service, but at the risk of their own health. I'll say it that way. So always in service, always giving. And it's also too about the receiving, but the brain won't allow it if it's biochemically not balanced. Okay. So this weekend, or if you've gone to LymphyCon, I teach in Calgary once a year. I teach every one of the courses once a year here. I do teach them in Arizona and Tampa and Chicago. We'll be exploring more opportunities there. Oh, I'm also teaching in Montreal in September, which is super cool there as well. So In Canada, like I said, I do it par, even though on the website it says US dollars. We have to manually do it, so then you have to reach out, say, hey, I want to take that. We have payment plans so that you can do that. But remember, this is 46 hours consult with me, and it transforms not only your practice, but also how you look at really the entire system. So it's super cool. It's quantum healing. And yeah, I just love this. So I'm giving this the opportunity. Anyone who mentions Lymphatic, I'm gifting that to you. And every time I'll be speaking at Robin's conferences, I'll be gifting that to people as well. Because I know 40% is not optimal. No. So awesome. So I'm going to end kind of there. And if there's any questions, if anyone has any questions, because I think we might have maybe a couple minutes. On long COVID? Okay, so great question. So I've actually, there was, and I can say it because I won't say his name, but I was working with, before COVID, I was working with a pilot that was with WestJet. And he was in charge actually during COVID making everyone get the vaccine. So this gentleman looks exactly like you. I'm just saying that because this is important. Exactly like you. So he was in charge of that. Wasn't really happy with that because the government could not mandate it to you. So they gave it to corporations to do. That's a way around because in the Canadian Healthcare Act, they cannot mandate anything. So they mandated companies to do it. He did it, WestJet. He got vaccinated himself. And so I'm saying the vax, so this is for the vaccine, but it's also for COVID itself, because both have long-term implications for some people. That is also biochemical, it's genetic. And so he came to me, and I'd worked with him before, and he came to me, he goes, you know what, I shouldn't be flying. He goes, because I got all these long-term COVID symptoms, and brain fog. He goes, I have heart palpitations, and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay. I go, I want you to do my brain nutrition program. And he goes, sure, because he's like desperate. He goes, I want to keep my job. And so yeah, it resolved all of his symptoms in 2 weeks from COVID. So that is biochemical. It can be done. The manual treatment, which partners with this, also it creates the space for the body actually to detoxify. Okay, but the two together I've had 100% success with that, which is super cool. But I said to him, I go, okay, if it works for you, I want WestJet to do it. And he's like, sure. And then it worked, and he goes, no, I can't, because then I would have to admit that I wasn't really capable of flying. So I'm like, darn. But anyways, it saved really his job, but also to his quality of life. And I'm going to share this because they are doing studies of this. I've been hugely involved in the research with COVID, also to the vaccine injuries, as well as COVID injuries. And they've been doing research actually since 2020 in California. They're collecting data from people who are vaxxed, not vaxxed, COVID symptoms, not COVID, all this sort of thing. People are shipping the details there. And I actually had the opportunity, one of my pet sitters worked for Alberta Health, and she was forced to do the vaccine. She didn't want to do it because she worked at home. She's like, I don't have to do the vaccine. But she had to get her titers tested for Hep A and B to see if she still had them. And so she goes, well, I want to get the titer for the vaccine. So her doctor actually did it. And it came back like she never got the vaccine at all. But she had the titers for Hep A and B. And I said to her, I go, are you 100% Caucasian? And she goes, you're not supposed to ask that. And I go, I'm asking. And she said, yes, she's Scandinavian. And I said, well, the darker you are, the more impact the COVID was, because it genetically engineered to impact people of color, Asian, Hispanics, Black people, Native Americans. So because they're in that same family, because it was developed in Asia. So Native Americans are closely related to Asians. And so she's like, yeah, and they're doing this huge study. And so that's how I got involved in this study. And it was like she never even got the vaccine. So it's just like AIDS. AIDS was developed also in a laboratory. If you're 100% Caucasian, you could swim in a pool of AIDS and never get it. You don't have the protein receptor. This is how it works with biochemistry. If you do not have the protein receptor for COVID, you won't get COVID. So if you're 100% Caucasian, which is not a big population on the planet right now, they didn't get anything, right? So me, I'm United Nations, so I got COVID, but I did my DNA testing back like probably 20 years ago. So I had the report. So I looked at my report and I'm like, I had none of the receptors for respiratory, only GI. So when I got COVID, I had GI symptoms. So it's like, oh, interesting. So going back to my WestJet guy, he looks like you. And I said that to him, I go, you're 100% white, you're fine. He goes, I'm half black. And I'm not going to end with this, but even with that, I am going to end with this in a good story. He basically got through all of the symptoms, still flying, super awesome. So yes, long story to your answer, but yeah, it does. It's very powerful. So great question. All right, I think, any more questions? Okay.
You mentioned something about needing the fascia to be like loose enough for the lymphatic drainage to work well. So do you recommend doing fascia before MLD?
So again, it depends on the person. So I have a system with that. You do a fascial assessment. Are there lines of tension in the fascia? Because if there's huge lines of tension, such as I call it the ski jumper position, like this, that's going to impact the lymphatic flow tremendously. So we have to actually get them upright and then do the lymphatic. So you can do the lymphatic, but what you'll notice with those people is it won't last, right? And so the rock stars that you're working with, they don't have that fascial restriction. So you can definitely do like the localized fascial release around them. But if they have these huge lines of tension or their chins here, then yeah, you really have to address that first. In the sense, you could do it in the same appointment, because you could do the fascial release, do some lymph, but be mindful that as you change that concrete, they're detoxing, right? So you don't want to increase the lymphatic flow too much. You want really so that they don't detox too fast, and then they get that healing crisis, right? So could even potentially do during the treatment, they sip water in between going from the fascia to the lymphatic. There's no rush in doing it, but yeah, sometimes you really do need to create that space first, for sure. So great question, thank you. All right, I want to thank, oh, another question. So yeah, so I say to people, sip, so take a mouthful, hold it in your mouth. Because what people do is like, oh, I'll just guzzle this all at once, and then I did my quota. So a minimum for each person is 1.5 liters per day. That's if you're just sitting on the couch. Okay, so normally hydration, elevation, alcohol, you're going to be looking at 3 liters sipping per day. And if you sip it, you will not pee like a racehorse. So also, too, if people are guzzling, they will continually always have to run to the bathroom because their body can't absorb the water. So just slow, a minimum of 1.5. I start some people off, if they're only drinking like 2 glasses, I'm like, then add 3, then add 4, and then transition away from the Coca-Cola, the pops, all that, the energy drinks, all that sort of thing, and just slowly, because too much change affects the brain, and the brain doesn't like change. So, but the fascia loves it. So you have to like marry them together. So cool. Great question. Thank you. Awesome. Okay.
Your nutrition program, does that talk about humic and fluvic acid for trace minerals?
So with that, I actually have an online course for that. For the brain nutrition program, it works basically on neurotransmitters. So my test, each question on that test is directly related to a neurotransmitter. So when they do the test, there's 114 questions. It takes 15 minutes online. I designed it for head injury, ADHD. So it's 1 question per screen, super easy, and it populates the results, and that tells me if they're related in one of 4 neurotransmitters, which are directly related: trauma, concussion, ADHD, and then creating a program specifically for their brain. Okay, so from that, that's my specialty. And then if they need to go and see a nutritionist specifically for that, or a functional medicine to carry it further, then I refer out for that. But mine's really specifically that niche. And it is like the missing link. It's the base. So super cool. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for showing up. I really appreciate it. It's been great. And yay, LibbyCon! Arms up.